Alright, hello. Today we're starting a little bit different as we are on Eleanor's shop. Tomorrow when this video comes out, this weapon rotation thing timer will say 2 days, 8 hours, but it's fine. You guys will still have plenty of time to get these weapons. And we're talking about the Coda and the Dual Coda Torxica. These two are absolutely incredible and they are 60% and 48% each. Coda pokes, sadly, only 30%. You should get these weapons as well, but sadly, not on this rotation, maybe on a rotation, that they are over 45% as the percentage on these works twice, once for the initial damage and once for the radial damage. And it is quite important that you get a high percentage on weapons in general, but even more on these ones. So, we're gonna talk today about Coda Torxica, tomorrow about Coda Sportwix, and you guys can get your builds and unleash the power as much as you can. So starting off today with the Dual Torxica. The Dual Torxica, usually compared to the Dual Toxicist, it makes sense because they're both in the same category of weapons, fully automatic secondary pistols, and in general these are just a slightly worse version, I would say, of the Dual Toxicist, but you have to remember that the Dual Toxicist is an Incarnon, meaning that if you're ever in a public squad, you basically cannot use this weapon as nobody will wait for you to get your headshots and then start actually using them. They will probably just slam attack with a Magistar and just... yeah. Anyways, the Torxica. This is a really fun weapon, and as it is a non-incarnon, you can actually use it right away. And it has a unique trait that is very interesting. So enemies damaged by the Dual Torxica spend 3 spores on death, which will inflict cold status damage. Additional assaults to infected enemies inflict 1.5 damage. Now, this damage is not just regular multiplier, it's not Bane, it's not anything like that. This is something called damage vulnerability. And what damage vulnerability does is it's basically its own separate final multiplier. But this is a special damage vulnerability as it doesn't work on anything. It only works on the Torxica, and it also works with other damage vulnerabilities. So for example, if you have Prey of Diner, right? With Prey of Diner, you would be able to get the damage of vulnerability from this augment, and then the damage vulnerability from the Torxica on top of that to an enemy, which basically one-shots them, which is, it would just go crazy. And this unique trait is very interesting for a multitude of reasons. First of all, it's cold procs, which makes it ideal for something like secondary Shiver, because even though the cold procs take a while to stack up, you start on one cold proc and then you go up, this basically can max out almost, because if you kill an enemy that is affected by a cold proc, they can also spread a cold proc, and then the entire arena has cold procs, which basically affects secondary Shiver. And if you're unaware, secondary Shiver works exactly like Galvanized Shot, which means that if you actually use this, you would have plus 45% of Galvanized Shot to the enemy directly. So let's say the enemy has, what they usually will have is 5 to 6 stacks of cold here. So you would have on 5 stacks a 225% damage extra to your 120% from Galvanized Shot, which is quite big, honestly. And as you can see the build, we do have quite a bit of status effects to boost that Galvanized Shot on top of that, so more damage doesn't hurt ever, and it's just super nice to have. Then we have something like secondary Deadhead. Secondary Deadhead, obviously always gonna be good. The extra headshot damage, if you like aiming for headshots, is gonna be really nice, and I have opted for both Galvanized Crosshairs and Cripping Bullseye on this build because I can reach red quit territory when combined with an Adarza, so I can actually do that. And Deadhead provides some pretty decent damage here, but my favorite one and the most interesting one in my opinion is secondary Encumber, because Encumber actually works with a unique trait. When the unique trait spreads the cold status, it will also spread more statuses through secondary Encumber, which is super weird. I don't know why it works like that, but it actually does, which is so interesting to me. I've never seen something like this happen in any other weapon, especially with secondary Encumber. So seeing this actually happen when I tested it and when I saw the wiki about this weapon, I was actually quite pleasantly surprised, because this can be so much damage, especially when combined with Galvanized Shot, for basically free. So I'm gonna showcase some of the flex arcanes here on some survival missions, and then I'm gonna show a secondary Enervate build. That is, if you don't have any of the other arcanes and you want to use secondary Enervate, because I know both Encumber and secondary Shiver are not the easiest arcanes to get, which is why I also provided secondary Deadhead, but you could also go for secondary Enervate and get some pretty good results, so I'm gonna showcase all of them. So, starting off right now, we are with secondary Encumber, which is my favorite one on this weapon, and we're on Ani on the Void. Usually I choose this mission because it doesn't contain nullifiers, which can ruin my mission. And right now, we're gonna hit an enemy. It puts the force on them, and then when you kill them, it spreads cold. But as you can see, cold electricity. Now blast. See, like, you spread status effects. That guy got viral. Like, it's so weird. It's so interesting. This is legit so good as a tech to use on this weapon. Not because you get extra status effect that increase the damage onto the enemy depending on the status effect, because obviously viral will increase our damage to enemy health by 100%, which is already really strong. But you can do that with a Conjurable Papilla if you want, or another pet. That's not an issue. The issue is CO. 120% increased damage every time you add a stack of anything to the enemy that is a different status effect. When that happens, that basically, this arcane, secondary Encumber, basically increases our base damage by around 480 to 600% based on when we actually get to attack the enemy. Because as you can see, these hold procs just keep going and keep going and keep going to these enemies. And obviously, this gets really crazy when you add pets in that can also abuse something like CO. So for example, you can use this weapon with something like Venari, which I'll make a video about. And Venari will start absolutely decimating everyone on her own. Because on this weapon, you will actually start spreading cold procs and viral procs and everything like that. And Venari just one-shot them through the Cold the Weak mode. And it just gets so crazy. So yeah, this is a very interesting way to use this weapon, and it's something I never really see in this game. This has the most unique trait and the most unique interaction with secondary Encumber I've ever seen on this game, and it is super powerful, like super powerful for no reason whatsoever. I think out of all the weapons, you know, secondary Shiver is like the no-brainer pick, kinda. Like, everybody is bound to pick secondary Shiver because of how much sense it makes with this weapon. And honestly, secondary Shiver is really good. But Encumber is just... I think it's the play, honestly. If I were to use something as my daily driver, it would definitely be Encumber. And usually Encumber is thought of as a arcane for priming, but no, this is definitely a damage arcane in this case. And then also the vulnerability if you use something like Roar, which is basically counting as Bane mode, or if you use any Maid mode or Expel modes in this case for secondaries, those are also multiplicative to the damage vulnerability. So you get damage vulnerability, you get CO, you get Bane modes or something, then, you know, you just go to town, you can do a lot of interesting stuff. This is a splendid weapon, honestly. Just such a cool weapon. And even, you know, even if you don't like use Encumber on them, look at the damage on that guy, you know? Even if the vulnerability doesn't actually hit, that Eximus dies so quickly, it's insane. When the vulnerability hits and then Encumber spreads through the vulnerability itself, yeah, it's great. It's honestly great. Also, you can see some of the red crits coming from the Kavat whenever it activates, as mentioned before. Really like Adarza, my favorite pet. If you guys don't have it, you should definitely get one. 60% damage or 60% critical chance, which is flat, is nothing to brush over. It basically increases your tier by 1 most of the time, and it makes a big difference. So yeah, here it's active and we get some really insane crits here. Really love it. I'm gonna activate Eclipse now because I hadn't activated it so far at all. And obviously, if you want to use this and use it to its maximum, I do recommend going for something like Arcane Velocity. And if you want to increase the crit tiers even further, you could even go for something like the Orange Swords. Because here, since you're using Encumber, even if you use something like the Orange Sword, Because of the Encumber, these guys will also take heat damage as demonstrated by him. Holy shit, my timing in these videos are so good. So good. Every time it happens, I swear. I'm like, I want to prove a point, and the point gets proven immediately. I love Warframe. The point gets proven instantly. It's like, I can red quit, boom, red quit. I can damage cap, boom, damage cap. I can hit this guy and he gets automatically hit, boom, he gets automatically hit. Like, on that exact second. You cannot make this up. I love it. But yeah, this because of Encumber, this means I don't have to mode for heat and I can run those shards and I can easily get even more critical chance by this. And this allows me to bypass secondary Enervate if I want completely and do something else, which is really, really nice. With those shards, you could probably also bypass the Galvanized Crosshairs mode and start using an Expel mode instead, which is also very, very good. But yeah, and it's obviously all preference, and that's the build variation that comes into play there, in my opinion. The overall idea stays the same though, for sure. So for the second mission, we're gonna change our Arcane for Encumber to secondary Shiver to show the difference. I think secondary Shiver is definitely the second best choice of Arcane here, for this build specifically, and it goes hand in hand with this weapon because obviously you spread cold procs with this weapon automatically. You don't have to mod for it, you don't have to have a primer for it, you don't need to do anything for it. You just automatically get cold procs, which trigger secondary Shiver and give you more CO, which is obviously really, really nice. The one thing I want to mention is that this CO doesn't exactly work like you think. So if the enemy is affected by a lot of cold procs, that doesn't mean that it changes its damage, like it gets added directly to Galvanized Shot. But instead, what it does is it basically adds more base damage if you hit these enemies, depending on the cold procs affected by them. It doesn't matter how many other procs are affected for secondary Shiver to work. Like this guy could actually have 6 cold procs, and then he could also have 1 heat proc, and the damage would be exactly the same. Like, exactly the fucking same. No difference whatsoever. But, when you add Galvanized Shot onto the mix, then the damage changes because of Galvanized Shot, not because of secondary Shiver. Shiver only triggers because of cold procs, not the other procs at all. But it acts similarly to the damage of Galvanized Shot, which means it just adds base damage to this weapon. Or if you have a multi-core weapon, it would add a multiplicative damage to that weapon. Now, with the confusion out of the way, because it is quite confusing, especially if you don't understand that stuff or if you're a new player, what you basically need to understand is that secondary Shiver is base damage for 99% of the weapons you're gonna use, and it gets affected by how many cold procs the enemies have, which in this case would be 5 to 6 for the most part when you're using the Dual Torxica, which is quite nice. Now, from the damage numbers, we see some decent damage numbers, but overall I think secondary Encumber and its extra crowd control effects and extra status effects, it definitely has the edge over secondary Shiver, despite secondary Shiver being a really good arcane for this weapon. Like, the damage from secondary Shiver is quite good. I can't even lie. Maybe, just maybe, you could skip CO, but I wouldn't really recommend it because you don't get to 10 cold stacks. You only get to 5 or 6, which isn't enough to replace CO, especially because 2 stacks of CO are enough to outdamage it already, which is quite crazy. And every time I say CO, in case you are confused, I do mean Galvanized Shot. CO just means Condition Overload, which is the equivalent mode for the melee weapons. It is the original mod that provided this mechanic, so anytime this mechanic gets mentioned, you know, the mechanic that adds base damage to weapons depending on how many status effects the enemy has, we just call that CO for short, and everybody understands it. Some people like calling it gun CO because, you know, obviously it's not a melee, so it's guns, but I think CO is just absolutely fine. I think most people will understand you when you say that. So, just in case you're someone who doesn't understand that and who wants you to understand what I mean by that, Here you go. Also, if you're still here and you're watching this video, if you leave a like, it actually helps. Like, it genuinely helps people actually find this video and look into it. Maybe they don't know the interaction about Encumber, or they want to check this weapon, learn how to build it, get their own idea onto it, maybe watch the gameplay, maybe learn about me. You know, it does help me, and you can just do it, and it will just increase the amount of people this video gets brought to by YouTube, which is just a really cool thing overall. I'm just saying this because I can compare my videos to other creators I watch, because believe it or not, I'm still a human, just like you guys. I'm not an actual company that just makes videos for Warframe, and I do watch a lot of YouTube myself, and when I compare my likes to view ratio to other people, I notice that it's quite low, which means that, you know, people just watch my videos and have fun, and that's fine, but they might forget that pressing the like button actually helps me, so I wanted to mention that. So, Acolyte is coming. Let's see what it does. Secondary Shiver can obviously only stacks 4 times into the Acolyte, and it might not even get the stacks onto him. I actually did get the stacks onto him, and it's violence, of course. You slut. Okay, I mean, not as good as Encumber, but still really, really good results. I think for the Acolyte specifically, the Deadhead Arcane is going to be the best, or the Enervate. I don't think Enervate is going to be the best because we have quite a bit of crit chance already by using the build that I'm using right now. So probably going to be Deadhead for the best results against Acolytes. So we'll see that when we actually extract this mission and take a look at Deadhead, which is exactly right now. But yeah, Secondary Shiver is not a bad arcane on this weapon. It's definitely usable. But for a legendary arcane that costs quite a bit, and it's from Duviri, and it's quite hard to get, I can see a lot better uses for it from other things, and especially on Archguns like the Corvus Prime or some other Archgun that doesn't really get any CO mode, and you can actually just add CO directly from Secondary Shiver. You know, it has a way better place on some other weapons. This weapon, going for Secondary Encumber, Secondary Deadhead, or Secondary Enervate, even with the other build I'm going to showcase, it gets the work done pretty well, probably even better than Shiver, but Shiver is still a solid choice if you want to do something different for once and you don't want to slap Deadhead or Enervate or something onto everything. Speaking of Deadhead, let's showcase that right now on the exact same build. Also, speaking of which, if you want to, you can also do primed heated charge instead of primed convulsion. Primed heated charge is absolutely fine. I prefer primed convulsions because I tend to aim for headshots, and electricity damage can in fact headshot, which if you're using something like Secondary Deadhead will actually give you a bit more proc damage, even though the initial proc of Deadhead, or the initial damage from electricity procs, is 1.0. So that's quite cool to know. Anyways, Deadhead obviously starts off a bit worse because you have to stack it, which is the big issue with Deadhead, especially if you are not really onto an easier mission. If you're somewhere like on level cap or level 500 and above, Deadhead will take a bit of time to stack, and obviously it's not recommended on enemies that don't have really easy heads to hit, such as Elite Deep Archimedia enemies, Tech Rot enemies, and the such. However, on a mission like this, it's absolutely fine. It's in fact really fine. It's fire. Sorry? Interesting. For regular gameplay, Secondary Deadhead actually adds a ton of damage to this. It doesn't look so much different right now, but you can see 380k. I think my highest damage with Secondary Shiver was like 240k, and my highest damage with Secondary Encumber was around the same, or you know, around 300k maybe. I don't remember, you know, but Deadhead definitely adds more damage per bullet when it comes to headshotting, but that's kind of what it does only. When it comes to Encumber, Encumber does so much more than just adding damage per bullet. You don't have to stack it, and the moment you get a kill, it just spreads by itself, which is absolutely crazy. A self-spreading status effect weapon is something that I didn't really have in my bingo card, and I'm quite interested to see how much the damage spreads from those status effects. So I'm gonna go to the simulacrum after, and we're gonna see if we actually spread something like a heat proc or something like that to see how much damage it actually deals, and if we can boost it on some cases to get some funny numbers in. Because I'm really curious on what it actually does. Also, I'm not sure why I couldn't hit that guy and why I didn't actually damage him, but I don't know, that was interesting. But yeah, Encumber definitely the best thing on those weapons, and something that I didn't really expect or never really tested until I actually checked some stuff out about the wiki. When I saw the Dual Torxica and I realized, wait, this weapon was always goated. I should probably make a video about it right now that it's in the rotation, because people would try to look into the rotation, get the 60% Sportrix for sure, but they might miss this one. So I'm doing a video on this first, and then we're gonna do Sportrix tomorrow, since most people would have actually already got that. This is, I think, the second time Sportrix has been on 60%, because if I remember correctly, I already have like a 60% for the Sportrix, so that's heat. Or electricity, I don't remember. I think I changed it to hit. We'll see tomorrow, but overall, all Coda weapons are quite incredible. A lot of people were disappointed in them because they didn't have anything too unique, aside from a few exceptions. But overall, I really like them. The Coda Bubonico is a blast to use, especially with the lock and load mode, and the fact that when you hold down the trigger, it increases the fire rate. That's a really nice touch. Fire rate is a very underrated stat, and a lot of people, you know, when you actually look at my videos, a lot of people will complain, oh, you're using Wisp, it's cheating. And if you think about it, the only thing Wisp gives is fire rate. But when the Coda Bubonico comes around and that gives fire rate, people are not sadly excited for it as much as I would think. So that's quite interesting. But this makes Coda Bubonico a really good candidate to actually just use Arcane Tempo on it and nothing else, and fully benefit from it. Or if you use more than Arcane Tempo and you actually put some fire rate on it, you get some crazy fire rate on that and get some incredible results. So overall, I think it's definitely interesting. Where the hell is the way people judge weapons in general compared to my builds? I think Coda weapons are definitely my favorite. One thing I don't like about Coda weapons is how high their mastery rank requirement is, because I mean, sure, the Coda Bubonico has some crazy stats which makes up for the mastery rank 17 requirement, but some weapons do not deserve mastery rank 17. I think some weapons should be lower mastery rank and just way more accessible, but that's just me. It was the choice. They have the upper hand on this, and you know they can do whatever they want. But I do think the MR17 is quite ridiculous, and introducing a new mastery rank for people to get weapons is not really great, especially because you can't actually cheese these weapons like the normal Kuva intended weapons, where you know they might say mastery rank 14, 15, whatever, but you could be mastery rank 5 and absolutely start a leech and do it, and you're quite chilling. You can just take the weapon from the foundry, equip it, and start playing normally, which is how my run for the 7-day challenge got saved. I basically got a Kuva Ogris and I started going for it. Anyways, as you can see on Menia, the moment I hit her, I absolutely shredded her because of Deadhead. I quite missed a lot there, but overall, the damage per bullet when it comes to actually hitting her was way higher than the other two Arcanes that I saw here so far, so definitely Deadhead when it comes to Acolytes, but secondary Encumber for everything else in my opinion. Alright, I'm on the Simulacrum. We're gonna check how much damage we get from the passive of Dual Torxica when combined with secondary Encumber. So we're gonna change the build here, put Encumber. It's really interesting as well, because when the enemy is affected by the Torxica, we also get the damage vulnerability, so it should be good in general, but we'll see. So there we go, radiation, electricity. Oh, that's my covenant. Okay, heat. I can't say. I maybe should unequip my covenant. Okay, there we go. 2 damage. 22 damage with the slash proc. So 2 damage, that's all we get. So it's basically 0? It's a 0 damage proc? This is really weird. Yeah, see, 1 damage. Again, it's like a 0 damage proc. I got a gas proc for 1 damage. When the guys are armor stripped from the Kavat. So it's that is so interesting. Why does that happen? So you're basically getting another status effect for free to just boost your galvanized shotgun. Dude, that's so good. That's actually insane, not gonna lie. Anyways, last build, secondary Enervate. This one we can completely ditch our crit chance mode and we can add an expel mode and merciless gunfight. Merciless gunfight, always really nice. Punch through on fully automatic weapons is something I really love. And if I did have a Raven for this weapon, I would definitely try to go for some punch through at least, so I can get more, you know, enemies killed in a straight line if I ever wanted to. So I really like this and the idea of it. And if you're in a tight hallway where enemies just come straight at you like a tube on the Grenier tilesets, is gonna be really nice. Speaking of Grenier, we have a expel Grenier mode here, so we're gonna change to Selkie for this one. But it is still a really powerful build, and it obviously would be because secondary Enervate is probably our strongest secondary Arcane right now. It just turns so many guns into monsters. Although this one has 25% base crit, so it's not that bad. Hello, immediately started the mission and I found one. Kinda crazy. Alright. So for example, this, if people came like on this direction, like a horde of enemies, I could shoot multiple of them by shooting one, which is really nice. Anyways, back to my spots. So Enervate obviously would get mainly yellow oranges. I don't think we're gonna see much red, but overall the damage is quite nice still. Like even with this, the damage is quite nice. Now overall it is lower damage than before, even if we can add the Bane mode on there. Like the expel mode rather. The expel mode really helps, and it provides quite a bit of multiplicative damage. It's another multiplier that also works with the damage vulnerability. But as you can see, in comparison to some other builds and the other stuff we did, the damage is not quite there. It is still fine, it's just lower than the other ones. The time to kill is definitely higher on this one. As you can clearly see. Still, not bad, but I don't think Enervate is the play here. I think you should have Encumber as the Arcane, the main Arcane. It's definitely the strongest one. And then Shiver, the second strongest, and if you don't have either of them, you can start with Deadhead and then work your way to Encumber. I think, especially now with people spamming arbitrations onto mirror defenses and having all the strats for it, a lot more people are gonna be doing... Actually, you could probably farm Encumber way easier, is what I'm trying to say. I'm pretty sure you could farm Encumber way easier. Even though on arbitrations, I know that people don't actually go for the crystals and getting resources. They just go there because it's a really strong mission for arbitrations nowadays. But overall, that mission has become a lot easier to do, and I don't think Encumber should be that hard to get anymore. It's just grinding. Obviously, the grind is still there. There is so much time that is needed to do that, but the other way you can get Encumber, if you don't know, is through Lloyd. You just use the Deimos Arcanes pack or whatever it's called, and not the one below Deimos, not the Cavia Arcane Collection, the Deimos Arcane Collection. And that one could give you some of the Tilkan Arcanes that are interesting for Venari, but it can also give you secondary Shiver, so I think it's quite worth it. I don't think it's that bad. Seriously? I was excited for an Acolyte, and it's a Stalker. Alright, Stalker. Did you think there would be no consequences? For who? Alright, let me activate Eclipse this time. Oh. There's the Jade Light. Where's Stalker? Oh. Really? Oh. Okay. I guess my third ability bonked him. Yeah, when it comes to acolytes, this will be the weakest one, in my opinion. Because we are sacrificing a mod to have a Bane mod, which does nothing to the acolytes, so... we will definitely not see the greatest results when it comes to that. That's my skeleton. Give me my Torxica back. But if I get bored, if it doesn't kill him in time, I will just hope to the skeleton low-key. And we should still see the one-shot, which is quite funny. Jesus. Yeah, Enervate's results are not great, and the build is pretty much the same, but optimized for Enervate by sacrificing the crit mods for crit damage mods, and a Bane mode, which is, you know, for Expel Grenier, plus the passive of this should be absolutely goated, but it's in fact not that crazy here. We're not seeing very good results. Where is the Acolyte? I know Soul Credit delays it, but come on, we're like a minute late here. Actually, no, we're not. Well, we're sort of. Never mind. These are still really fun weapons, even with a sort of underpowered build like this one. But obviously, the Encumber attack is just so much better. So much better. Alright, Misery, she is the weakest one, so we have a chance. That's not great. Not great. Compared to the others, at least, it didn't kill her that slowly, but compared to the others, it is quite slow. But yeah, Enervate, your weapon has enough crit chance, I would say is not the play. You could probably just go for a better Arcane to increase your base damage, or even increase your damage in general, but yeah, no. When you have the crit chance, there is no reason to sacrifice it by using secondary Enervate, and it's probably gonna be much better to use different Arcanes to improve your base damage instead and just mod for the crit chance. Arcanes, in my opinion, are stronger than mods, especially right now with the way that Warframe has evolved, and you should definitely pick those correctly. The final build, and the one that I'm gonna be using for the most part, is gonna be this one, with Encumber, both crosshairs and Cripping Bullseye for the extra crit chance, so I can reach red crits, Lethal Torrent for some fire rates, and then just normal modes here. Can swap Prime Convulsion from primed heated charge, and then either Wisp because she's my main, or if you're using something else, you could go for Arcane Velocity, which is a really popular Arcane right now that you can get for free by playing the Belly of the Beast event, and this will absolutely be enough for you to make the gun feel really nice to play still. Thank you very much for watching another video of mine, and I will see you on the next one.